reserves and for going in and out of Gaza over and over again, for all that you are, what you represent, all that you've done, and all that you do. It's an honor to have you here. As difficult a day as it is, there couldn't be a better day, because there was a need to have an excuse to gather, to be together, to emote, to feel, to connect, on such a day which is so beyond filled with pain. And I want to just take a moment, really a moment, because we have a special speaker. I want to take time away. But just to mention, our hearts are, of course, all with the families of Rushko, Poland, Carmel Gat, and Yerushalmi, Alexander Lomanov, Amos Arusi, and Ori Danino. The mother spoke here, and we joined her in the tefillah on the belief that they would come back together to visit the community. It's not just the news last night that we woke up to this morning of the execution of these 6 innocent hostages. A barbaric act by barbaric people. They are seeking to divide us. Similar, Hamas could get no greater satisfaction or pleasure than seeing Jews blaming Jews for the death and murder of Jews. To do so feeds only into their hands. To be divided is to give a victory to our enemies, and therefore, even as complicated and difficult and painful and as legitimate as there are questions and debates surrounding these issues, we have to remain united, and that's part of what tonight is about. But tragically and really incomprehensibly, these 6 losses were not the only losses over the course of this weekend, and we can't allow them to overshadow the 3 policemen, the 3 police people who were brutally murdered. We opened a roadblock, a checkpoint, and within minutes of opening that checkpoint, within minutes of the humanitarian gesture of opening a checkpoint, we were paid back the brutal murder of 3 policemen. Sergeant Roni Shakuri was killed in the terror attack, and tragically, we lost a child on October 7th, as well as 2 others. And yesterday, we lost Staff Sergeant Elkanah Navon in Petach Tikva, 20 years old. He was in yeshiva in the same shul, the same class as my nephew. My sister's son is currently serving in Gaza and in Rafah. The army allowed them out tonight, so tomorrow they could attend their friend's funeral. These are each unbearably painful in their own right. We wish for such a different outcome, particularly of those 6 hostages. After last week's heroic rescue of the Jewish hostage, just a kilometer away, so close, it could have been such a different outcome. And we're left wondering why, and we're left asking how, and we're left wanting to turn on each other with blame. But I want to leave you with this thought tonight. Before we'll say just a paragraph of Tehillim and to daven together to express our grief and our sadness and turn it into tefillah and into hope. Tonight is the last night, it is the last day of the month of Menachem Av. Tomorrow night we'll begin with Chodesh Elul. This month is Menachem Av. We call it the comforting month of Av, even though this month is filled with the greatest Jewish tragedy. Tisha B'Av, we just sang before, marking the destruction of the 2 Batei Mikdash, the 2 temples, Inquisition and Crusades and pogroms and expulsions, the Holocaust, and the expulsion from Gush Katif, for which a kina has been composed. On October 7th, the modern day kina, we had Sapir Cohen here on Tisha B'Av. We heard from her 55 harrowing days held in captivity by Hamas. So the month of Av is filled with pain and loss and tragedy, and this weekend just adds to that list. In perpetuity and forever, how can we call it Menachem Av? And there are many answers given to that question. But it occurred to me today because of the way that I felt. And I'm sure you all do. We've been punched in the gut, and the wind is knocked out of us. And to be a Jew and to be part of the Jewish people today is to be angry, is to feel anguish, is to be sad, is to be grieving, is to be worried. It's what it means to be a Jew. Someone who doesn't feel those feelings has to ask themselves their connection to the Jewish people, to Jewish history, and to Jewish destiny. It's what it means to be a Jew. And as painful as it is to be a Jew today, and to be repulsed and infuriated when the media talk about death instead of murder, and prisoners instead of hostages, and blame the wrong address for this outcome. What it means to be a Jew is to be infuriated by the media, to be sick and tired of empty statements, and to long for action and the weight of the United States of America to go get their citizens in every which way. To be a Jew today, on this day, is very, very painful. But we wouldn't have it any other way. Because it's a privilege to be a Jew. It's a privilege to be part of this people. And is there another people in the world? Your tears don't stop streaming for people that you never ever met, whose family you likely never will meet, and yet they feel like your immediate family. Because over 320 days you've been davening every day for those names, for that better outcome. To be part of a Jewish people is to be 6,000 miles away, and to be immediately next to each other at the same time. It's to have never met, and to feel an intimate connection and closeness. And the nechama, the comfort in Menachem Av in this month is that whatever we go through, however hard it is, whatever the outcome, we are a people, we are a family, we have one Father, and He has a plan for us. It's not random, it's not chance, it's not purposeless. We're marching towards an end. We're marching towards a mission. We're marching towards Hashem's plan for our people. And there's a nechama, there's a Menachem Av, even in this month, that is filled and characterized by so much tragedy. Please God, we should find the comfort by being together tonight, by being with one another and from one another, by being connected to Jews all over the world and decent people all over the world who feel our pain and connect to our plight. And please God, that the true nechama, the ultimate nechama, should come the day when all the hostages will be home and the soldiers will return to their family, the day that will inhabit and settle the width and breadth of Israel. Doctor, we can visit back on the beautiful shore, on the beautiful beaches that he had to leave. The day that the true nechama will come, the coming of Mashiach. Please rise in one kind of Tehillim before we invite dear friend Dr. David Rand to introduce the rest of the evening.
Thank you all so much for being here. Before we get started, I just want to thank Dr. Naimer for helping arrange this tonight. We're honored to have Professor Sody Naimer here with us tonight. I think, Dr. Naimer, where do I start? Not just a reservist, Dr. Naimer is actually a 65-year-old frontline combat doctor from Gaza. When I say front lines, I really mean front lines. I can tell you personally from various sources of evidence that he was at the very front and continues to be. That the strength of character, and the strength in general, during the storm this afternoon, I think he was swimming about 100 laps on the floor. But the fact is that Dr. Naimer decided military service, when I say he's from Gaza, he's really from Gaza. At one point, being the only doctor in Gush Katif, treating many of the terrible attacks results thereof in his 16-year service in Gush Katif before he was forced to be carried out in 2005, was known throughout the community throughout Israel. While he was being dragged out, in his army uniform, he predicted everything that would happen 20 years ago until today. It was actually a newspaper article. It was an article recently after October 7th that called him the Navi, the prophet. Because as he was being dragged out, there's a documentary about this. He was saying, I'm telling you, we're going to be missiles on Ashkelon, there's going to be missiles on Sderot, there's going to be missiles on Tel Aviv. We're going to break through the border one day. He predicted it happened, unfortunately. Professor Naimer represents their bodies, but it is to serve, to be a part of Polyxo, and to continue to do so without boundaries. Not only has he been significant as a physician at Yale University with dozens upon dozens of publications, but in Gaza, with his experience, he has been a father and a grandfather himself, and has been in that role to some degree for our soldiers in Gaza. I know several circumstances where he was at comfort during the war, during some of the most difficult moments. I've had the honor of being able to work with Dr. Naimer on developing a technology that he invented to be able to prevent hemorrhaging in time to war and other cases of trauma. And I must say that although much of the story he's going to present will take roots from the inside, it may be very difficult. My cousin, Mikta Bolas, who was interviewed after October 7th, said, you know, in every tragedy there's always a hero, and you have to focus on the heroes. I can say that Dr. Naimer is truly one of my heroes, and we're all honored to come today to present roots from the inside, both the Dr. Shatif and the current one.
I thank Hashem for being involved with what I have been. First, the financial disclosure of every good doctor is to start with this is part of my family, and all the spiritual assets that I'm getting, I think is the body I was going through. Whoever is first with the geography, but this is going to show up. And honestly, showed me something. Ashkelon, Gaza begins, you go inside Gaza, all the way down to the Egyptian border, which is over here. Gush Katif had some of the villages pop over here. The main bulk of the villages were from Lutzerine, crossing the security line here, and then all along the seashore, the farms and greenhouses is literally, in actual fact, served the land with great success. But we exporters of cherry tomatoes all Europe. It's from us. We learned the locals from us that when you take the sand, you have the proper irrigation, you can produce just tons and tons of cherry tomatoes with a lot of blessing, and other crops which are very, very blessed.
I refuse to make new shaking on my feet because I said that Eretz Yisrael hasn't seen it. So they argue about it. We cry in our country. One week in the center of the city. The music thing that I saw is that I got a notice to my telephone. This is actually a notice from the reservists office of the Army. And what they tell you here is, you can look over here, look at the date that they show here. They're just letting you know that you're just going to finish your military service at the date of 31st of December 2030. There are advantages and disadvantages of being 65 and beyond, and the music what's called kashish, you're elder. As a doctor, there's a story that a guy once calls his doctor. He goes, "Doctor, I have a problem. I have a bowel movement dragging me every morning at 6 o'clock. So he says, "What's the problem?" He says, "The problem is I get out of bed at 7. My memory is still functioning partially, so I think that's a great advantage. But jogging here in the Boca Raton, I see a sign that says "Do not stop." So I think the whole state of Israel is not such a sign. So once you have the momentum, and fortunately, I had the privilege of treating trauma victims for a long time. As I was taken out of Bushman at the time, the question that was raised was, am I entitled to endanger my life in combat? Well, what's happening is I have a whole family, close to 10 kids behind me at the time, and my wife she was in her 9 months of her 10th pregnancy. And I had to ask a question of a Rav, what's the din in such a situation? And the first condition that the response that I received was that, first of all, you have to make sure you're in shape. So the officer that was interviewing me, I said, well, if you want to run a race, we can then put it to the test. And he learned that from Kalev, that when he wanted to capture Hebron, actually he was rewarded Hebron after the entrance to that part of Eretz Yisrael. He told Yoshua, my force and power now is as it was beforehand. He was at the age of 83. I don't know if I'm going to continue till 83, but it would be definitely regular. The second condition was that you have to have your wife's consent. And Baruch Hashem, my wife, not only did she agree for the fact that I served, she realized that it would be so frustrating to be at home and have all the knowledge of your fellow soldiers, despite the gap of the ages. And the third thing is that actually it's a mitzvah. And if you have a mitzvah, it's a real privilege that what you can do is you can be on that altruistic point, and despite the fact that legally, when you have more than 6 children, if 6 children are beyond, you're exempt. During this current war, we had a point when 5 of my son-in-laws and 3 of my children were all in service in Canada, and our house turned into a dispatch center. We learned where the daughters or the daughter-in-laws had difficulty in coping. They'd come and spend the weekdays and the weekends together with my wife, helping with the full diapers and yelling and screaming, and sometimes lack of attention because the fathers were at home at that actual particular time. That very day of Simchat Torah, I was spent in Alei Zahav, which is one of the villages in the Shalom, not far from Ariel, wherever those areas in the Shalom. And right after Vatikin, we finished up, and I think it was 7 o'clock, 7:30 in the morning. Then we saw a number of those that lived in Alei Zahav, which is partially religious, it's divided maybe half and half. They got into their cars. And it's rare to see a guy with an helmet on his head open the car, take his parcels and all his equipment and get into the car. And I thought, that's probably mass hysteria, just like happens all the time in the country with the media the reporters making a mountain out of a molehill, but in fact we realized that there's definite danger. And at that point, I was convinced I have to turn on my cell phone. As I turn on, I see more and more their messages come immediately to unit. And in fact, I get in together with my son-in-law, who's the rabbi there, and we traveled towards the center of the country. Our mine unit happens to get organized all the warehouses in the Chabad. And I go home, take my equipment, my fatigues, and I go to the army base. As soon as I reach the entrance of the army base, they said, no, you can't park here, you have to go to an area where there's a large parking lot. And they send us to the parking lot of the local cemetery. Well, they're trying to remind you exactly what your position is supposed to be or something like that. But I park the car, I pick up my equipment, and I stand waiting for the buses, the shuttles that are taking to the army base to get your equipment. And then a guy comes up to me and says, no, you can't park there. I said, what do you mean? I've already parked. He says, no, you have to move your car. He said, yeah, but what will happen if another car parks next to you, and another next to that car, another next to that car? You're going to block off the entrance to this big parking lot. I said, so stand here, if somebody else comes, warn them. I said, today's Shabbos. And anyways, I was debating what to do. I threw him the car keys. I said, look, take the car, do what you want. But it's a serious debate, and I asked that halacha question afterwards. Is the situation like that where he feels that if they endanger in a situation where cars can't get in and out of the parking lot, it wouldn't be allowed in that situation to move the car on Shabbat. So the rabbi asked, he said to me, definitely, in that situation, it can arise a situation where you're blocking off vehicles and the right people reaching their service. I said, would you do it? He said, no. That's the big deal. He said, but listen, there's a mitzvah to destroy Amalek. I'm not a harm. I told him, when that happens, call me. I'll take care of it. It was a very tough day for all of us. I would like to just share with you a quote that I saw from one of those that had to deal with more than we did. What actually happened was that our unit arrived. The commanders decided not to enter the attack in Gaza that very day, but to get organized and then to take an assessment of the situation. And it was weeks of training until we actually went in. And this was one of the requests that they had for us, that we should take care of the bodies that were lining all the roads on the outskirts of Gaza. And one of the quotes that I saw was like this: just a few hours after the word broke out, the police and IDF announced the opening of a forensics identification center for the dead at the Shura military base. Teams of police officers, Zaka volunteers, IDF personnel, doctors, and forensic technicians worked tirelessly for months until they identified all the victims. A bone, a tooth, a sliver of skull. They came bags, endless bags mixed with ash, coins, bullets, and shrapnel. Like imperfect tapestry, some held the remains of different people. The bags were numbered, cataloged, and scanned. DNA was extracted. The science was precise, but it was hard to know what happened, how a person was killed. One bag showed clues to the final seconds of life, unnerved and intrigued. By Dr. Ken Kupo, the head of the National Center for Forensic Medicine, since October 7th, the staff has been working on identifying the remains of some of the 1,200 people killed by Hamas militants. It has been trying to understand not only the causes of death, but also the underlying need. I never thought in my life that I'd be faced with pictures, black and white pictures, that I was able to remind myself to a jog memory from the Holocaust. There were private vehicles that had RPG missiles thrown into them. There were vehicles together with bodies inside where they threw in Molotov cocktails, so all that was left were only bones. The bones were stuck to the metal coils of the upholstery of the cars. Maybe it was because I felt that I was more experienced, I specifically went to those parts and to those vehicles, so the younger soldiers would have to be exposed to that, and what we did was inside bags and we brought the variants. I'm not going to go into the details here, but this is a part of the Zohar mentioning that no matter what, and what a source or behavior or spiritual attributes of the Jew who happens to be killed, in the name of Hashem as a Jew, at the end, his neshama, his soul will rise. Every Rosh Chodesh, Hashem sees those souls that rise to the heaven, and they're commonly remembered by Hashem, and they're joined together with the 10 killed by the kingdom, Aseret Malchut, and Hashem is filled with revenge to the nations, and when the time comes, and will allow that full revenge to expose itself. I thought that I wasn't affected after all the things I saw in the past. For instance, Chatuel, the family with the mother was pregnant, and a boy, and the 4 daughters were murdered savagely on the way to Gush Katif a few minutes after I passed that actual checkpoint. And when I heard on the radio that there was an attack, and I got back to Gush Katif, and on the road I found her and her 4 daughters killed point blank range. And him digging up the bodies, I figured, we may as well develop some kind of a hardness immunity against that. But like 4 months after the war began, I enter one of the houses, and on the table in the living room, I see this picture, which is actually an anatomy book of the resident that was probably in medicine or medic or something like that. And just looking at the face, all of a sudden I was shaken up, and I figured it must have left some residue of anguish. It's some inside, and some of it is very difficult to suppress. And we have to pray to Hashem that you can sustain such terrible sights and continue to. The next day, what happened is that we all gathered in the kibbutz called the Flasim. There's a monument there from the time of the Independence War. And then we were briefed that we're going to go to a camp to train, and then whenever the command was given, we're going to go into Gaza. We got organized, and so it was that we went for a while. This is the picture of the kibbutz Beit Levi. I don't think very often they have such a large group of religious soldiers at the time, but they recall that the zirot that we sang on Shabbat were something that was unforgettable. We had a minion right underneath the dining hall every single morning, and it was very special times. This is at the camp. I couldn't retain my beard because the GoPro, the helmet, kept on ripping off half of my face. So this is my older brother, and my nephew was together with me in the same unit, in the same brigade. So we met at the gate of the army base at the time, and this happens to be the rifle range in not far from Bet Shemesh. It's called Benjamin, and there we had to train. And at a certain point, I was told by the commander that we're going to have to do a rifle range on Shabbat at night. So what do you have to do? Because it's precautionary, which is a matter of saving lives, and there's no alternative. You have to do it on Shabbat. In fact, one of the secular soldiers, this is after the sunset, and we accepted Shabbat. We're waiting for nightfall, so the darkness arrives, and we have to actually perform the rifle range. So this is the group of soldiers. Partly religious, partly non-religious. They're singing. Because there's a women's group with all the spouses of the soldiers that are serving, they circulated this video to all the women and all the wives that are residing at home. So we were debating if it's a mitzvah or is it a transgression. And the question was answered by the rabbi that we consulted with. He said, "What are you talking about? The fact that it was done already and it was circulated. It's a mitzvah to circulate this. You see the unity within the soldiers, the good spirits, and the atmosphere that's going on there. Something like that is what can strengthen you. And when you have your wife and your children that together with you, with the spirit and they're secure, that you're all together as one piece. So it will give you the ability to rest assured that everything was going well, and therefore it's not a disagreement in the fact that it was already performed. Again, this is the kibbutz, and then we have to continue training. It was a pretty nerve-wracking time. We didn't know any minute whether to call us in. I can recall just that in the course of being there, I think it was the first 4 weeks of the war, that it was only the 4th week that we were mobilized to enter Gaza. It was my first grandson's bar mitzvah. And I wanted to go together to meet the whole family. They went to the site where my son is in the Shalom, called Chabad Milad. And they said, well, you're coming, are you coming? And the commander told me, he says, we need your spirits and we need your sense of humor and encouragement from all the guys here. There's no one letting out here. Besides, they can call us any minute. They don't want to let you go. So he started yeshiva just today, it's the 1st of September. I said, someday I'll make it up with you. I don't know if I'll have time for it. Sure, it will happen. But this is the training of the event, and this is just training. This is for letting you know that you have to do it actually. What you have to do in this situation is to get the drill so quick and rapid to the state that you don't delay even a split second. Because every extra time that you're delaying the evacuation can be a question of life or death. In fact, when I worked with my team in Gush Katif, years before the army learned that you stop infusing water into the wound veins and they brought blood in this war straight to the front lines. And they realized that as soon as something happens and somebody's wounded, instead of performing procedures that are sometimes superfluous, load them on the carriers, get them to the launching pad, and get them to the hospitals as fast as possible. There's unprecedented success in treating the wounded in this war at any time previously in the history of mankind. And the questions that's asked, and I'll show you examples in the case that I've been privileged to teach, to take part in, but they had an unbelievable amount of amputees because previous wars they would just cease in the field. They didn't take them out fast enough, unfortunately. And here I met up with a friend of mine that I worked together with the emergency medicine shifts in the hospital. This happens to be an officer of mental health, and you have no idea the difficulties that they have. There's something like up to 20 to 25% cases of self-harm where the army hit their own men. Just imagine a whole team, and they see suspect and they shoot, and it ends up that they tell them, unfortunately, you've killed an Israeli soldier. And they fall in spirit, and these men went straight into the front lines, sat with the soldiers, explained to them that in certain situations, there's no way to differentiate, and you shouldn't take it hardly to heart, and you have to continue performing your tasks without any eating. We continued until we were set in, and this is a share that I gave on Shabbat with the sources. There's no such thing as an innocent population as they like to claim. I don't think anybody can see that as well as mine. Anybody that opposed when they brought in those hostages, and the whole population came out in the streets to yell, to scream, and to prevent anything. They were cheering, they were howling and spitting at them. Anybody who was there can tell you exactly what happened. And these are all the sources that, even if they're damaged, I don't know what the double standards are of the U.S. Army, but in any case, I don't think that a soldier should be jeopardized in any way to prevent from harming the local population. Because of public opinion, I think the Army takes extra precautions that aren't exactly called for. And here I'm briefing the previous unit. I was in an old unit which didn't have the abilities that the unit I was in afterwards. And they called me to ask and brief them regarding blood control. And here's I'm demonstrating on the soldiers at the time. For some reason, I take a look at the faces, I don't recognize anybody. They're all of a sudden youngsters, because all the guys my age, they haven't been discharged already. And this is a special case of somebody, one of the soldiers in our unit who was just married 3 days before St. Anton, and she never had a wedding. Because what they did, they were planning on the kibbutz, they decided that they would perform the ceremony in the cabinet, and the following week, they'll have the wedding and invite all their friends to celebrate together. She was there to surprise her husband, to say in a minute. But what happened was that I see her with a dog. So I ran up to the Jeep that they stood her up on, and I asked her, do me a favor, tell me, do you want to go pets or do you want to go children? She said, children. I said, so listen, you're going to take folic acid. You're going to get prepared. I said, but do you want a child this year or you want to wait a few years? So what did she say? I said, look what happened. They waited until they came back from the maneuvers that they were doing all this. My husband doesn't even know that he's going to have a wedding in the army after 2 years. So what happened was we all went to the next. From a whole day of training in the fields. And his mother was in the big crowd, all of us were waiting around to see how it goes. And what happened afterwards? You see? They go up. He gets off the team, and then they're tying a bow tie, and he sees his mother, just like, what's going on? What's going on? So this year, the commander of the brigade is tying a bow tie to the celebration. And everybody's doing this in the response. Then it's two. And my son is going to be at the gate of the and this is really my son was up there, was not waiting, but he sees the play. Happy ending of this thing is that my son told me that recently, because they're together, she's expecting a baby boy, so they're waiting for me to come back. And before the circumcision, when they get back to Israel, when she reaches the end of her delivery. At the time, I was successful in fixating IV infusion lines. We did a study many years ago in Gush Katif and proved that it's effective. And all I got was a demonstration that we did together with this film in order to prevent bleeding. And in actual fact, it was found much more reliable than tourniquets. It doesn't have to cause cessation of blood flow to the area. We were meeting at a conference here this past week at a conference in Orlando, and there are 30,000 amputees from the war in Ukraine at the moment. And with the development that we managed to devise, we can save those cases. This is again page green. And what I wanted to show you here is the soldiers, their bravery, their patience, their discipline is something unheard of. And there was a certain point when I was debating whether to continue serving in the position as a combat physician or not. Take a look at this. I reached one of the points in the Givati Brigade, and this is the way they were living, these guys. You take a look. There happened to be, there's a driver right next to him, there's a machine gunner and a commander behind him, and at the back were a physician, and there are 3 soldiers on each side. One is a medic together with me, you'll see him. But then look, they happen to be the first week of entering Gaza, 16 days inside this vehicle without leaving. I figured somebody has to have their head examined, either the commander or these guys, how do you do it? And you can imagine the difficulty when you have a female paramedic inside this vehicle together. What do you do? But they perform their task immaculately. They waited patiently, they're allowed. My problem was, when they were allowed out, they continued sleeping there every night. I said, that's enough for me. That's not for me to be like that. Take a look. They gave me a special position, lying sideways underneath the two chairs there. I said, another night here, and I'm done. That's it. Never mind the age. And then they said, okay, you'll be upstairs in the building, and we'll call you if there's an emergency. This is what began looking like. And when we entered Gaza, this is after the treatment of the artillery and part of the neighborhoods that we entered. I just want you to know we're stationed in a grove on a kibbutz at the entrance because it's only 1 or 2 kilometers towards the first neighborhood that we have to enter and penetrate. And it's a whole problem on Shabbat. What do you do? Can you carry? Can't you carry? And the halachic guidance that we receive, we don't want to be nervous. You should be calm, you should be collected. You shouldn't worry about the sides of Muktzah, the sides of carrying from one place to the other, because the main idea is for the soldier to be accurate. You should be attuned to all changes, and for the calls, it should be ready to respond and to react as best as possible. And this is an example of the beginning of us thinking, because the two medical armored personnel carriers were the only armored vehicles that were going in and out of the troops that went in were in charge. Just look how many windows are open towards the horses. In actual fact, those armored personnel carriers are doing so fantastic. We broke down in the middle of evacuation sometimes about dollars, then we changed to something that's called a Naimer afterwards. And this is actually one of the incidents where we stopped in the middle of a call to enter one of the villages, and they shot at us from a village about 800 meters away. And there was a dispute between us exactly what happened and how to respond. It was pretty nerve-wracking. This one of the soldiers telling him, one of the wounded was a soldier who had a bullet penetrate one of his shoulders, and he used the regular wrap, which was opposed to regular orders and commands in the army, which wasn't exactly fond of the fact that you're deviating from the regular commands. And then the other question that arose was, what about the graffiti? There are all kinds of political graffitis written all around Gaza, some which were in the like of the high commander and some weren't, but there was a dispute between the poskim, exactly how to judge something like this. You take a passage that says, "No shivah kalatam, I will not return till I destroy them," which David David says in the Psalms. So part of the rabbi said that it would be blasphemy, so you shouldn't write anything on the walls. And some of them said, "What? All the more so, encouraging." And when we got in there and I saw this, I could tell personally, I was pretty proud. You see, our soldiers were here and they left a mark. And I hope that in the future there will be one house in Gaza that's still standing that doesn't have a mark that we were once there. And this is a fascinating story. As I'm traveling together with the head of the brigade, all of a sudden we see that on one of the walls in the middle of Gaza, it says, "Noni Leidakala, have an easy delivery." So I take a look at the head of the brigade, I said, "Well, we have manpower that can substitute all the soldiers that are here. What kind of an idiot is here when it's like this in the delivery room?" I'm going to answer my story about that. But in any case, he looks at me and he says, "I don't know what's going on." And in any case, a few days later, the medic that was in the previous picture holding that roll, he's hugging his friend, and he says, "Brother, what's doing? How's Nomi doing?" I said, "Nomi, that rings a bell. What do you mean, Nomi?" He said, "Wow, she gave birth to a baby boy. Right now, he's too smart. I'm going back to the bris, and I'll come right back." He happened to be an Israeli that couldn't find a job. He went to the United States. He was an hour away from San Diego. And he had this all kinds of construction company. Just to think where he was spiritually, in order to receive a green card, he has a photo album with a male in all kinds of positions, showing that they're married to one another to demonstrate that they're American citizens, because the other guy was an American citizen, so he got a green card. But when he heard there was a war, he got up, grabbed his stuff, and came straight to the front lines. And then he went out for the risk, and then what happened afterwards? And we should be in great gratitude for all the miracles that we had. And this is one example. This is a video from Hamas. They were showing the take a drone, and when they saw people, soldiers, they just dropped this grenade on the group of soldiers. And as you see here, they supposed it was going to hit right in the center of these soldiers. And you can see demonstrated here. And look what happened. It actually fell on the side and could have taken a much harder toll than it did. And then you can see the soldiers running for rocket. We had no idea if it's a rocket grenade from one of the houses that were nearby or from the heaven. We had no idea because there's no way of knowing because they have their bombs locked in and mortars all the time. But in fact, this very incident, besides one bleed that was from an internal bleeding and a slow bleed because it wasn't endangered at any point, there were 11 soldiers with bleeding from minor sites, one of the limbs, and a lot of them had tourniquets supplied to the bleeding. And because of our device that wasn't exactly right for market at the time, it isn't approved formally, so I was using that graph in order to control bleeding. One of them had actually a tourniquet applied, and after the bandage was removed, we saw the tourniquet was applied so lightly, it in fact increased the blood loss, and they had pulsating blood loss at the time. In any case, the soldiers themselves, these are the two medics, they were testifying to the fact that we're saving lives with that. The commanders were to have, I just want to share with you the development that we reached. It's called the elastic adhesive dressing. And in order to improve control of bleeding, we have this, you'll see this, hopefully in the coming months, you'll see this. We're hoping to supply the Israeli soldiers with these devices in the upcoming confrontation, because all it has to do is be wrapped around the body part, it's bleeding profusely, and automatically, not only is it covered, but it's transparent, so you can see if you're effective or not. There's nothing like that in use at the current moment. And we used it on depressed fractures of the skull and for amputations. You can set in that will as a tourniquet if you wish. And this is an outstanding case. I had the privilege to treat in Gush Katif from this far into the soldier's face. And despite the terrible appearance of the face at the time, this whole thing was wrapped, his airway was deviated, and he's alive, walking around today, and hopefully in the TikTok that I'll meet him for the first time in my life. He's alive today. So we're hoping that this thing will get out there. That's why I'm here in the US for the president to develop this. This is an example of one of the happy moments where they educate towards terror. Can you move close to the left side and you can think of the soldiers part of the mission. And you can see all the soldiers aligned around This is one of the happy moments. And this is an example of what happened that 5 minutes before the ceasefire, they had so many lines that they didn't have an opportunity to use. They just decided to demolish a whole neighborhood. And when you reach Shabbat Zion, you say, Vayishma Chanai, Kovash Gadol, I heard behind me a loud noise, and the whole thing blows up like that, which is a special moment. And we were here at a certain point at the north of Gaza, along the seashore. It's called the army is called Sikin. And this is where we met all kinds of people. I didn't recognize them. They remembered me from somewhere. And this is before Shabbos. I have to go to the mikvah because that's the sanctified Shabbat. But purposely, they have this whole pool there that they train inside, and there's no slab or anything. So I told one of my buddies, I said, we have this hose over there because there's a wall, and whoever goes in can't leave. I said, just hold the hose out there, and I climbed up the agriculture piping to get out of there. So I was able to spend Shabbos with the rest of the soldiers. It was amusing. My son's now Golani. He says, they finally found the mikvah 5 minutes away from the gate of their army base. So every year of Shabbos, they go out there and do a double, and they feel very, very satisfied with Shabbat. And the waiting can drive me crazy, so we have to use ourselves. This is an example of just finding a prop in one of the schools in Gaza. So this is the way we acted an amusing patient call in duty. So the soldier comes in and says, I'm not feeling it. He says, my belly's hurting me. I'm torn to pieces, I'm tired, I'm fed up. So I'm telling him, listen, a combat soldier is everything in the world for me. We'll do everything we can for you. We just have to examine you. He says, okay, doctor, do what you have to do. We'll just take it 10 minutes. Okay, I feel good. And watch out. This is jogging between maneuvers so I can maintain my sanity. And this is the visit of the mayor of Gaza to Canton. This is a gimbal of somebody because I was sitting really Duffy over there and he stuck his face inside the water. I don't know, he ran away or something. He had to make up with the being. This is a school inside a place called Bet Raton, and we were there for a number of days. And then, unfortunately, we were called to a very difficult event that occurred. What happened is that two soldiers inside the building that was blown up, and we got a call that there were two severely injured soldiers, and we have to see them immediately. The commanders were very, very well trained at navigating. They managed to find their ways through the small streets, and then we had to enter a building where there were two soldiers in a very difficult situation. One of them had both legs amputated on the spot. He was already artificially respirated by one of my patients from Gush Katif, in fact, that now is specializing in orthopedic surgeon and did a good job. He had a pulse, and he was the second stretcher that was brought out of that building. The soldier that I treated was a soldier that lost his left leg, and because he was full of shrapnel from head to toe, he was bleeding from his face, from one side of his face, and he had a tourniquet applied to both of his arms and both of his lower limbs, and they prepared plasma to administer in the field, but there was absolutely no way to insert an intravenous line. What are you supposed to do when the tourniquet's all over, just like I mentioned beforehand, when you're cutting off the blood supply to all the limbs? So in any case, somebody was trying to manage the airway, and I told the team that was there, listen, let's get into the launch pad immediately. Afterwards, we discovered that in fact he had very, very bad bleeding inside his abdomen. He had no pulses at all. During transit, we did everything possible. We removed the tourniquets which weren't necessary. We fixed a line, an intravenous line. We administered an anesthesia. And then trying to respirate him, we had to do a cut down in the neck to enable him to breathe. And what happened at the time, I was on vacation from duty at that period of the war. And I was following up. What happened was on the launching pad, you're bagging him artificially through the airway that you managed to insert. And you can't feel any pulses, there's no way to know that he's alive altogether. And he's there, and we're waiting for seconds because the chopper was already approaching us. We fixed a second line in his other arm, and then all of a sudden, one of the soldiers yelled out, "I feel a pulse in his groin area." I was absolutely elated to know that at least all our efforts were rewarded. They took off. He received blood in the air, and he was so unstable during the evacuation, and instead of landing in Tel Shemir, that was intended to reach the level one trauma center, they landed in Ashdod. And the next morning, they told me that in fact, he still had a pulse and he was still alive when he reached the hospital. So I was very pleased to hear. But within the next week, the only thing we could do, we found out his name, we prayed for him. His name is Yad Ben Yedida. I was briefed time and again. There's what's called Siyat Tishul, a connecting officer in the army. And the day that I was free to take a time to visit, and the least you can do is to pray for a soldier, which is in such a jeopardized condition, and do your best for him. So I decided to take a trip to the hospital. On the way, the officer tells me that what happened is that he's in such a difficult situation. He's fighting for his life. He doesn't even have a stable blood pressure. And who knows, they have to amputate his other leg, the foot, from the ankle downwards. And I entered the intensive care. I said hello to the doctor that was on call there at the time, the intensive care doctor, and I went to see him. And when I entered, I couldn't believe my eyes, because this is what I saw right here. I see he's completely conscious, and he takes a look at me, and this is what he said to me. I said, "Do you want to send a message to treating you?" I said, "Sorry, to see you. Do you have anything, message to send the soldiers that helped you?" He said, "They're very dear to me." Thanks for saving my life. I'm so glad that you were there for me. I love you all. So what I can tell you is that I just wrote down crying because in all my time, 60 years in Gush Katif, I never had the experience of somebody that was wounded to such an extent. He underwent an abdominal operation. He received the strongest antibiotics. And I told his mother, this is an absolute miracle. An hour and a half without blood pressure, and there's no brain damage. It's just unheard of, something like that. And what happened afterwards is the other soldier that had bilateral, both sides amputations of his legs, he was complicated even more. Eventually, they amputated both his arms, and then he died. And when I went to his funeral, I wanted to take part in the mitzvah because I wasn't in action in any case. And this was the funeral that was shared on spring. He was released from hospital to go to his friend's funeral. It was obviously a very, very exciting moment for all of us. What we should remember is that even after his life was saved, this is a picture of him leaving the hospital and receiving the recognition of the whole staff that was part and parcel of his care. But what you do have to know is that that's only the beginning of the path that he has to go through for healing of its stumps and assigning proper care and rehabilitation. And just to exemplify, I'd like to show you a clip of another soldier who had a terrible, terrible neck injury and was completely incapacitated. And together with prayer and very hard work by the staff and those that are under the care, what they actually
I am here to speak with you, Hashem. I am here to speak with you, Hashem. Starting to see how I am. Starting to see how I am. I've been lost before I know, but here I stand, holding your hand, taking a part in your plan. Taking a part in your plan. And now I'm walking down your path. Even with the questions I have to ask, it gives me hope to know that I belong. In the end, I'll reach out for you and take your hand. Tati, my King, Father, I plead, no, ever let go of me. Never let go of me. So Tati, my King, Father, I plead, no, ever let go of me. Never let go of me. I'm starting to realize that you will be so kind. I'll follow your plan, just don't let go of my hand. Tati, my King, Tati, my King, Father, I plead, Father, I plead. Never let go of me. Tati, my King, Tati, my King, Father, I plead, Father, I plead. Never let go, never let go.
It shows how hard work you pay off at the end. Baruch Hashem, I hope that will be the result of all those that are wounded so badly. This is one of the breaks. I'm going to pray for all those that we care for. And obviously, for it to reach the rest of the family, you have to take out a video, send it on a WhatsApp group. Otherwise, it will reach them. And here we have to pay tribute to all the wives that are taking care of the children on their own while their husbands are on duty. one of my sons is going back to Gaza this coming month. During the course of the fact that I'm in duty, we heard terrible news. One of the days that I had to go, from the beginning of the war, I did only 2 shifts in the hospital. I'm going to show you a demonstration of one of the cases that I treated. In fact, that very shift that I did. But this is a picture of Sody, my nephew, that actually, well, I'll just show you the short clip of it. That's my brother-in-law. The fact is that he dreamt all his life to be a singer. He entered a contest that the competition was conducted during his service in the reserve duty. He won the competition. The song he was singing is that by Hanan and Armi, I'm a blind man. And it's not purely coincidental because he was born with night blindness. And he did part of the pilot's course until he eventually was rejected. But he entered combat, and because he was night blinded, all the maneuvers that they had to do at night, navigations, etc., he held on to somebody. They never knew that he had that deficit. And what happened is that he wrote in one of the messages that he sent out to the family, he said, I have a private goal, but my main purpose in life is to tie my fate with that of the rest of the nation of Israel. And him, together with his commander, they approached one of the buildings that had to reach the cleanse from the terrorists, and because of an explosion, he was sacrificed, unfortunately. This is just a quote from Rav Kook with that saying. This is common together with the family, that just like a woman that's pregnant and waiting to deliver the offspring, you should know what he says, every suffering, it's in order to give rise of birth and life eventually. And it's something that they can bring joy to their parents. All the problems and all the attrition that go to the nation of Israel, but obviously for the appropriate purpose. The last part, I'd like to show you what led to returning to Gush Katif at the time. Okay, I have a first cousin. I have a first cousin that lives here in Miami Beach, Dr. Gary Rosenbaum, maybe some of you know him. At the time he came to visit Israel, he said, is there anything that concerned you? I said, yeah, I mean, part of the soldiers, some of the soldiers, they actually have these cameras that you can affix on your side of your helmet, and you can document the activity during the wartime. And this happens to be shot as, you can see the last rays of the sunset. And at that very moment in time, I called the rabbi, Kosek, I said, am I allowed to prepare, this is cutting out something that had to be an adjunct to attach it to the helmet. And he said, well, if you're using it in order to save lives, and every situation, as far as trauma is concerned, it can always result in some moral or some lesson that in a future case, we have to save lives. So definitely all the preparations, they allow avoiding the sanctity of the Shabbat at that point, and the actual activity they have to perform, the issue is completed completely. And this is at the time preparing the camera to affix to the helmet. And he was a kid in Gush Katif. He helped me save the life of a 1.5-year-old child that had a piece of shrapnel in mortar, a mortar that was shot into Gush Katif from one side to the other. He grew up, he's an excellent paramedic, and we were together with the Givati Brigade inside. And this is the 3rd time we're learning Gemara, Taladaf inside Gaza. I think there's nothing more symbolic than the places where they want to murder and kill us, to sit and learn Torah and do everything that we can in the free time that we have. And it was definitely elevating to our spirits. These are the various places we had to be, this picture you saw. One of the greatest elements that we saw was the humility of the officers, obviously to pick out and to manage to release one of the hostages was a very great feat. And I was together with the Givati Brigade when the 2 South Americans were actually released. But we were ready. At 7 o'clock, we were supposed to exit and go to Rafah area. The commanders, they told us wait 2 hours, and then another 3 hours, and then only 3 o'clock in the morning they decided to call it off because they weren't ideal conditions to make sure that nobody would be harmed. And it happened afterwards when another unit exchanged us. It just shows how the concern is to save the soldiers' lives. And this is one of the buildings, as I mentioned, where we had to enter. It says here, the children should return to their lines. And Gush Katif, we didn't forget Gush Katif at all. And this is my wife and I coming back from my jogging when I was on vacation there before going back. And this is bringing Tzfat, Mali Sui, and Nachum Mishkazim. And here I was in the Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. And this is a very symbolic case. Because I do circumcisions, Nishem Shamayim, for the last 35 years or so. This is the case when I was on vacation, the day that I had to go to the baseline in the afternoon. This gentleman over here calls me, he tells me, I had a baby boy, and I'm having the brief taking place right next to, in a cafe right next to the Hebrew University in Jerusalem. So I say, great. As I see him for the first time, I see a bunch of soldiers standing there. I pat him on the back. He says, don't touch my back. I said, what's the matter? He says, I was shot in the back. I said, you're standing here? How can that be? Hashem loves you. He says, don't ask. I just stuck my head out of the top of the tank. He's an officer in tanks. He said, the bullet went in, crossed my body, and didn't do any damage, but here's the vacuum to help his wound clear completely. Okay, that's a very, very blessed situation. And I could continue to perform the beat. Right after the beat, I'm taking the child and arranging the bandage and diapering him. And I asked the grandmother, it's on the table, I said, something strange with this sandak. This is his father-in-law. I said, as I'm placing his hands over the child's knees and telling him to hold his hands, he's looking straight at the head all the time. What's the matter? She said, you don't know who he is? I said, no. I said, well, maybe you can fill me in. What's the story here? He said, go and ask him. I go right next to the chair of the sandak and I said, tell me the story. What's going on? He said, the first night on war, I was in Golani. And I was in one of the regions that was attacked, and a bomb fell right over him. The other Golani soldier right next to him was killed, and he became blind, both of his eyes. Since being blind, he got married to the grandmother that I was speaking to, and he did a degree in university. He ran a marathon. 18 years after he was injured, he was able to see for the first time for both of his wife. His cornea operation succeeded. He was able to see for 6 months, and then it dropped. It again deteriorated. But in any case, how significant and symbolic it is, the blood from the child, the father that's obviously doing his duty. And I forgot my talisman. I didn't get it back yet because he's been service the whole time, so I'm waiting to get back and find it one day. Another difficult thing to endure was I came to a Greek not far from my home in Yad Binyamin, and I reached a Greek where I walk in, and the situation was there was the father, the brother of the father of the boy that was just to be circumcised. He was killed in mistaken attack of two groups of soldiers that said it goes one against the other, because they were stuffed with weapon and they didn't know that the other group was exactly in the same area. And they were certainly going to call the child in the name of that soldier that was killed. It was actually the child's uncle. And as I walk in, I see the butcher that sold us every Yom Tov all the meat that we had for Sukkot and for Pesach, and I see standing there. And I said, "How's your son doing?" So he says, "I'll speak to you in a few minutes." I remember his son very well because everyone in a number of bristles, it could be bleeding while you're bleeding, and you have to run over to the house and you have to fix the bandage a bit tighter and you solve the problem. So I remember going to Sderot to fix the bandage at the time. So it stood out in my mind. We finished the bleed, and then I say, "Well, what's the story with your son?" And he said, "Well, I'll tell you the truth. He's not with us anymore." Because what happened was, that day, Simchat Torah was in Sderot, and then he heard the war broke out. He was in the Maklan, a specialized unit. He didn't even have his rifle with him. His brother was at the time on vacation. His rifle was in the house. He took his brother's rifle. He went down to the junction of Sderot, where there were cars and cars of victims inside. He fought there with the terrorists that were on the spot. He continued towards Sody, which is 10 kilometers away. He fought there. He continued towards the kibbutzes that were around that area. And then he ended in Be'eri, where at 6 o'clock at night he was killed. And this is Shiva Cohen, Machine Kondo. What a privilege it is to do a bit for somebody that's so brave. And the last anecdote that I have, which teaches a lot of the bravery of our wonderful soldiers, this is a bit that was taking place inside the rehabilitation of Tel Asher Hospital. And what actually happened was, I was working that shift in the emergency hospital, in emergency room in Bellinson Hospital, and as I'm standing there, they tell us the choppers coming in from Gaza. I went into the trauma room. I enter the trauma room, and they say there's somebody severely injured. The specialist in emergency medicine will be there. I'm a family physician. I took the second bed, and they brought in the sandak over here. His name is O, and they bring him in, and he's actually in excruciating pain. He immediately received the painkiller. We tried to take out some history because the pilot wasn't there, the medic wasn't there, the X-ray physician wasn't there. We had absolutely no note of what's going on. We saw that he had a tourniquet laid on his leg. Our device wasn't there yet, unfortunately, but he had a swelling over his back, and we were very, very worried that he may be a subject of a serious spinal injury. In any case, we turned him over. We didn't know we had to rush him to the X-ray. And after we worked him up, he received blood because his blood pressure dropped a bit. On the way to the radiology department, he opened his eyes and he says, "Sody, is that you?" I said, "Wait a minute, who are you? What's going on here?" He says, "What do you mean? I'm the son of the head of the municipality. To me, where you work." Happens to be, I called his father. His father was at fuel of one of the other soldiers from doing at the time. He only answered me after 17 times that I rang his phone. I told him, "Listen, you have nothing to worry about. Your son is here in the hospital. He's wounded. He's conscious, and we're just working him up, and you'll see him soon." In any case, he didn't even tell anybody until that point in time until he agreed exactly what happened. So after I performed the circumcision, I sat him down and I said, "What happened?" Unfortunately, the soldier came in together in the first bed, succumbed to his injuries, and died inside the hospital. So I said, "Well, what was the situation?" And he told me the whole incident of the miracle. In fact, he didn't even disclose it to anybody else, because I see his wife taking the cell phone recording the story because he kept it to himself. In actual fact, the commander, the head of the platoon, he was the vice head of the platoon. He was the officer. There was a vice head of the platoon and the platoon commander. They were all gathered in one room inside a building that they claimed that they cleansed it completely of terrorists inside one of the neighborhoods of Gaza. It's called their unit is called Shaked from Givati. They entered the building. They had 3 prisoners that they tied up, and as they were in the room, they were briefed, and after they were briefed, they were singing happy birthday to the commander. It just happened to be his birthday. The commander of Shaked, his brother, was murdered in the party in Nova, and he was doing a service, excellent service. He managed to kill a few Arabs, terrorists in the party itself, and then he came to go enter with his unit there. What happened was, as they were sitting and singing happy birthday with like 30 soldiers crammed into a small room, they heard around the shots the floor above them. And at that point, they didn't know what to do because the vice head of the team was actually disappeared, and he was guarding at the entrance of the room. He was shot in his leg and was thrown into a side room. His radio man was killed. And then right after that, the machine gun man was killed. They had a group of terrorists on top. And because of the situation, they didn't want to get the Air Force or the tanks to shoot because they were afraid that the vice head of the group would be jeopardized and maybe killed because of that. Eventually what happened, they brought a special unit together with them, and they managed to overcome the terrorists and kill them. But what happened was that he was taken down with the whole stairwell, and as he was at the bottom, they still lobbed a grenade on top, down right next to him. Unfortunately, it was faulty, it only partially exploded, and he wasn't affected by that. He just had a limb injury, and recently I received a video from his father. I downloaded him in the morning, and he shows me he's on a runner. He's back to himself, and he's running already. And actually, the halacha, we asked for such a difficult question. What halacha would you do? And the answer we received is, in actual fact, you were entitled to shoot to the upper floor, even though there may be a soldier there, because in such a situation, it actually happened to be that he was already killed by the first round. Just imagine if he hadn't been killed, they could have sneaked up from the upper stairwell and shot a grenade inside that room and could have killed the whole group. Baruch Hashem, that's not what happened. I was there for 3 weeks, and towards the end of the presentation, when I get in, I just want to tell you, it's difficult to be weeks and weeks after being so far from the family. But I just want to show you what happened. I was there, I got sick at the time, and what actually transpired is that I got out from Gaza. They brought us to Kibbutz Magen, which was right on the corner, and then that night was Shabbat. So the religious soldiers actually stayed in the kibbutz. After Shabbos was out, and what happened was, as one of the fellow units right next to us, there was a girl that was engaged, and her fiance was just there. She came to visit him on Shabbat. So I said, do you mind if I can get a lift with you? And I had so much equipment. I had the medical equipment I stole from the houses and the hospitals in Gaza, and full of equipment. She said, by all means, I'll take it straight home. I said, this will be nice. So you're going to see the end of this clip exactly what happened.
Daddy's been gone for so long, for in my grave. He joined the corps, fighting the war somewhere far away. Promise me he'd return when the Hanukkah candles burn. So here I wait. The blessings are reside, but the candlelight, but it's very late. Stay with
I saw the daughter, that's what it is.
let me sing upon your name. I receive him in my eyes. Every time she cries, tries to comfort me. It's scary.
I was telling my wife that she counsels and she guides brides the laws of purity and preparing them for marriage. So I said, this is the one that will contact you when you decide to get married, and probably will be the guide to prepare her. But I want you to know that this instance is very symbolic. If any of you know a book that's called it's written by Rabbi Teichter, who was a Holocaust survivor that was eventually killed before the end of the war. And he wrote the book called entitled Ena B'nai Smecha, the mother of the boys is happy and joyful. And he says, he called the book that name because there was somebody that was reprimanded, and he was arrested, and he was away from his family for a very long time across the border because that's what the officer did to him. And then they were reunited a bit afterwards, and he said that's only a symbol. But Eretz Israel, the land itself, is weeping and crying and yearning for their sons to return and settle the land in all their places. We got into America, and eventually we reached a point where we had to enter. Actually, we reached back in the same place of Gush Katif where I used to live. And this is a 7-story building, or a 10-story building. I can't even count the number of floors which you have to go in to clear out. And the building, one after another, we entered. This is a group of soldiers that we were together with. And as we were entering there, here, this is before the attack we had on that place where they told us there were soldiers inside. And that night, you can see on the screens, we actually saw the shul of Gadid, which is the village right next to us, which is still standing. And then we reached the place where the Gamit Yeshiva was there inside. And we entered there, we thought it was successful. And this is actually when I'm on the roof of the building. That morning, we were up all night, and this was a hospital where what they did was they just educated and managed to deliver all kinds of creatures that hate Israel eventually. But what I can show you here is that I saw from the ceiling, from the roof of this building, in fact, the outside of our house, and it turned into an agricultural field of growing vegetables or something like that. But it was very, and it was actually a very special moment when I'm standing in the window in this hospital, and I can take a look at my clinic in the Beit Khalil. You see it from this window, and because it was a few hundred meters away, the army decided they don't want to enter there. And I just want to show you here. This right over here. This right over here. That's the Yeshiva Be'eri, a giant building, 3 stories high that looked like I'm in the lead. They didn't need any room here. But over here is the main road of our neighborhood, and at the end of this field is our house. And I think when the time will come, we'll return there. I had a mikveh inside my bedroom, and what's hard of the mikveh is outside there. When we go back, we're actually going to see it. This is taking care of the buildings like we did towards, but that's actually what happened. This is learning Torah within the Beit Khalil, actually, with the group of boys that we were together with. This happens to be a mansion of a neurologist that works in the Yeshiva Hospital, and we were there for a significant amount of time. Here we were voting for the elections in municipalities afterwards. We have to do some exercise, and we haven't done yet. So I'm teaching you this reading what floor hockey is. You've never heard of it. But I'm telling you, it's the only way for us to relieve our tensions and somehow keep in shape. It was interesting when you look at this. These are 2 of the kids that I did their circumcisions in Gush Katif, happened to be with us. And the last case I want to show you the miracles is this fellow here. He's married for 4 years, has 3 children. They live in Givat Harel, which is not far from Shiloh. And he was together with 4 commanders that were standing in the living room of one of the buildings, and they spotted him while they were the terrorists in the building right opposite. They shot a rocket-propelled grenade, and they killed 2 officers that were there. And the ones that were wounded was him that came back to work. He's called Zir. You can take a look here and see He had a piece of shrapnel lodged inside his neck and was profusely bleeding from there. Someone took his hand and just pressed on it all the way to the helicopter, and just like that, all the way to the hospital. And that's the way his life was saved. When I went on vacation, when I went for the next shift at the hospital, they told me, go and visit one of our soldiers that are there. What happened was he took off his protective eye gear in order to look at the screen of the cell phone, the maps and navigation. And then the explosion occurred. He lost his vision. And the day I got there was the first time I told him his vision is back to normal. It was obviously a very, very festive occasion for all of us. And I'd just like to end here with Shabbat Zachor. I was there just before the Purim, and I just couldn't help it to draw a brief feeding myself. And I wrote there, we promised to return, here we are. And I would just like to end on the note that we should be completely reassured that just as we saw in history, that this is the officer, and this is a guy that was together with me. Unfortunately, despite the fact that he was a Kohen, the first day when we went in, he had to load 13 bodies, including one beheaded officer, on the jeep to bring them to bury him. But we can be sure that Hashem promised that it will all be for the benefit, and we have the history. You're going to see this video clip that I would choose to end with, is that we know that one of the 15 principles that we have to believe in is that, as opposed to others that think that this life is finite, there's no continuation. We know that the soul is eternal, and Rabbi Ari Levine, everybody must know this, the actual subservient and tzaddik of Yerushalayim, and he asked each one that reaches his grave to say out loud, Ani Ma'amin, I believe in full faith, when Hashem decides there will be revival of the dead, when Hashem sees that the time is suited for that. And what happened to a friend of mine is that his son was in one of the units that we served as a medical unit that you saw earlier on. He always used to perfect his professional acumen and his position as a sharpshooter. Unfortunately, what happened was there was a new unit that joined in, just to show us that Hashem works in his own ways, and they were in one of the buildings taking the position. And when the other group came in, the sharpshooters, he said, I see you have new sights, I'd like to test them and check them. I just want you to know this fellow comment was that we are already prepared to settle it, that when you go back to Gaza and start settling the land again, there's already a group that's prepared to go and live there in a settlement city called Ma'oz. He and a friend of mine had a competition. They had a site inside the unit, putting on film and those who wouldn't govern in the morning. And he was more popular because the coffee he made and the biscuits he had were better than the other guy. But he spent time, one of the secular officers that were there said that the first time in his life he sat and regularly used to learn chapters of the Tanakh together with him. And actually he stationed himself behind the sights of the rifle, and just in that specific point in time, he was shot in the head by a sharpshooter from the other side. And this is actually, I think, just goes to demonstrate exactly what we're hoping for very soon. And with this. This is Bergen Belsen, those that wouldn't believe that you'd be liberated. And they sang a tikva at the college. I don't think they ever dreamed that in 2 years we would be at the independence stage. Despite everything. Words of the song are that if you die, part of you will die together with you. If Keep our session from God together with you.
כי כולנו יקרא אנושי אחד חיה ואם אחד נגדל לתמימן משהו בנו משהו נדע איך להגיע האיבה עם הנדע להשקיט את זמנו על אף עולמנו לומר סליחה להתחיל מהתחלה
ברוך ושלום לשבחה, וזכינו לך ל-25 שנה, חגות הסתר ולהתראות בתחיית המתים.
אתה יצרת
wish you all a חודש טוב.